The engraved brass keys were sitting on a blue velvet cushion when my father called me to the front of the shop. There were at least 60 people crowded onto the sidewalk outside Morris Mercantile. My mother had tied cream-colored ribbon across the doorway, and somebody from the local newspaper was taking pictures. Through the window, I could see the new shelving, the polished counter, and the framed licenses hanging behind the register under a sheet of white paper. My sister Valerie stood beside my parents in a fitted green dress. She was smiling like she'd already seen the photographs. Dad lifted the cushion with both hands. "Paige, come over here," he said. "This is a family moment." That was an interesting thing to call it, considering nobody had told me what they planned to say. I stepped out from behind the register and stopped near the doorway. My shop manager, Joseph, moved closer to me without saying anything. He knew something was wrong. He'd known for weeks. Dad took the brass keys from the cushion and held them up for the crowd. "My name is Paige Morris. If you've ever watched your family celebrate someone else for the work you did, you'll understand why I stayed quiet." My mother touched Valerie's shoulder. "For the last few months," she said, "we've been working toward a new beginning for this wonderful place." People smiled. A few relatives started clapping early. Then Dad handed Valerie the keys to the shop I'd spent 10 years building. "This belongs with someone who can take it into the future," he said. Valerie hugged him. The newspaper photographer kept taking pictures. I didn't move. That morning, I had unlocked the front door at 6:15. I'd checked the delivery from our cheese supplier, corrected 3 prices in the register, and moved 2 cases of preserves because sunlight was hitting the labels. I had also put fresh paper in the receipt printer. Now my father was standing outside my shop telling the whole town it belonged to my sister. Valerie held up the keys. "I'm so excited to come home and continue what our family started," she said. "Morris Mercantile is entering a completely new era." Then she looked at me. It lasted less than a second. Her smile stayed in place, but her eyes asked the question nobody else knew to ask. Was I going to stop her? To explain why I didn't, I have to go back much further than that morning. Morris Mercantile had been on Main Street in Galena since 1968. My grandmother Elizabeth opened it when she was 26. Back then, it sold flour, canned goods, cleaning supplies, and whatever else people needed without driving out of town. By the time I was growing up, it had become a narrow little specialty shop with old wood floors and shelves that leaned toward the center. Grandma sold local jam, imported olive oil, pie plates, tea towels, and kitchen tools she insisted would last longer than the people buying them. She was usually right. The front door had a brass bell that made 2 different sounds. One was a clean ring when somebody walked in. The other was a dull little knock when the door didn't close all the way. I could tell which sound it made from the stockroom. Valerie hated that bell. "It sounds like a dentist's office," she said once. She was home from college that weekend and had come into the shop because Mom wanted a family photograph. Valerie stood near the front window with her coat still on. Grandma was behind the counter, wrapping a ceramic mixing bowl in newspaper. "Then fix it," Grandma said. Valerie looked at her. "Fix what?" "The bell." "I don't know how." Grandma folded the newspaper over the bowl. "Paige does." That was usually how Grandma handled comparison. She didn't make speeches about which granddaughter was more responsible. She just noticed who knew where the screwdriver was. Valerie was born in 1991, 3 years before me in 1994, and our parents had decided very early that she was meant for something bigger. They never said I was meant for something smaller. They didn't have to. Valerie was the one who got dance classes, professional photographs, and a leased car when she graduated college. I got praised for being sensible. When relatives asked what we were doing, Mom would say, "Valerie's building her career in Chicago. Paige stayed here to help with the shop." The way she said stayed made it sound like nothing had happened, like I had missed a train and decided to sweep the platform. At family parties, Dad introduced Valerie by listing whatever she was doing that year. She's managing a fitness program in Lincoln Park. She's working with private clients now. She's building her own brand. When he introduced me, he usually smiled and said, "Paige is the one who stayed." People meant well when they answered, "Oh, that must be nice for your grandmother." It was nice for my grandmother. It was also work. I graduated from college in 2016 when I was 22 and joined Morris Mercantile full-time. The shop was failing then. That part disappeared from the family version later. The front awning leaked. The furnace worked when it felt appreciated. Grandma kept sales records in a green ledger and ordered products by calling vendors from a telephone mounted beside the stockroom sink. The shop had no real website. Its social media page had 7 photographs, 5 of which were sideways. Grandma knew the business was in trouble. One evening in October, she locked the door and turned the sign to closed. Rain was hitting the front windows, and we had made less than $400 all day. She sat on the stool behind the counter and rubbed the base of her thumb. "I can pay you through Christmas," she said. I was counting the drawer. "All right." After that, I don't know. I looked at her. Grandma didn't dramatize bad news. If she said she didn't know, she meant she'd already checked every account twice. "How far behind are we?" "Depends which bill you ask." "That's not a number." "No, it isn't." I closed the drawer. She looked tired, not helpless. I never saw Grandma look helpless, but she had a stack of invoices beside her elbow and a heating bill she'd folded into quarters. I asked, "Will you let me try some things?" She glanced toward the shelves. "What things?" "A website. Online ordering. Events. Maybe cooking demonstrations. We don't have a kitchen. We have a counter and an electrical outlet." "That sounds like a fire report waiting to happen." "We can start with tastings." Grandma studied me for a moment. "How much?" "I don't know yet." "That's also not a number. I'll have one tomorrow." She nodded once. "Then we'll talk tomorrow." That was how I started rebuilding the shop, not with a grand plan. I started because the heating bill was folded beside Grandma's hand. I made the website at my kitchen table in the apartment I rented above a florist. I photographed jars of cherry preserves on a white towel because we couldn't afford proper product pictures. Joseph helped me carry boxes upstairs after closing so I could enter every item into the online inventory. He'd started at the shop a few months before I came back full-time. At first, he worked 3 afternoons a week. He was quiet, punctual, and very good at remembering what customers had asked for the last time they came in. When I told him I wanted to start shipping gift boxes, he looked around the stockroom. "With what boxes?" he asked. "I'm working on that." "With what packing material?" "I'm also working on that." He picked up a stack of old newspapers. "So we're starting a shipping department with yesterday's sports section. For the first week, yes." He nodded. "Good to know." Our first online order came from a woman in Iowa who wanted 2 jars of apple butter and a red tea towel. The total was $41, including shipping. Grandma printed the confirmation email and kept it under the register for 6 months. The second year, we started weekend tastings near the front window. I called local bed and breakfast owners and asked if they'd put our cards in their guest rooms. Most said no. A few said yes because Grandma had known them for decades. I made little maps showing how to walk from the larger parking lots to Main Street. I put together picnic boxes for couples visiting the wineries. I asked local producers if they could create smaller sizes that tourists could carry in a suitcase. Some ideas worked, some didn't. We tried selling handmade pasta, but people kept picking it up and putting it back after seeing the price. We carried flavored salts for 3 months and sold almost none. Grandma said nobody trusted purple salt and the sales numbers supported her. The Christmas gift boxes worked. The cooking demonstrations worked even better. We brought in folding tables, borrowed induction burners, and paid local cooks to show people how to use products we sold. Joseph handled reservations. I rearranged the entire front half of the store every Friday night and put it back before opening Saturday morning. People began posting photographs. Tour groups started putting us on their schedules. A bus from Madison came twice in one summer because the guide liked our mustard tasting. By the time Valerie came home for Thanksgiving in 2018, the shop was busy enough that we had a line at the counter. She arrived just before noon wearing a cream coat and carrying a phone on a little stabilizer. "I want to get some content," she said. Grandma was restocking crackers. "Content of what?" she asked. "The store, the old shelves. You working." "I am working. That's the point." Valerie turned her camera toward Grandma. I stepped between them. Ask before you film her. Valerie lowered the phone. I just did. No, you announced it. She gave me the look she'd used since we were young. It said I was making an ordinary situation difficult because I enjoyed rules. Mom came through the door a few minutes later and immediately noticed the tension. What happened? Paige doesn't want me promoting the shop, Valerie said. I didn't say that. Mom set her purse on the counter. Then what's the problem? She was filming Grandma without asking. I was making a nice video. Grandma put the cracker box down. Rhonda, take your purse off the counter. People put food there. Mom moved it. That ended the argument, but not the story Mom told later. At dinner, she said I had been territorial. Dad laughed and passed the potatoes. You know, Paige, he said. Once she gets responsibility for something, she acts like a border guard. Valerie smiled at me across the table. I was trying to help. I could have explained that I'd spent 2 years building the shop's online presence and that Valerie had never shared a single post until she wanted a rustic background for one of her videos. Instead, I asked Grandma if she wanted more coffee. She held out her cup. That was how most disagreements worked in our family. Valerie described her intention. My parents treated that intention as the important part. Whatever she had actually done became secondary. Grandma noticed actions. In the spring of 2019, she asked me to meet her at Aaron King's office. Aaron was a family friend and an attorney. He'd handled small business matters for Grandma for years. His office was above a real estate agency, with a narrow staircase and a waiting room that always smelled like printer toner. I thought Grandma wanted to update her will. When I arrived, she was already sitting at the conference table. Her recipe box was beside her chair. It was a wooden box with faded yellow flowers painted on the lid. Aaron closed the door. Grandma said, "Sit down, Paige." I sat across from her. Aaron placed a folder on the table. For the next 40 minutes, he explained that Grandma had formed a limited liability company for Morris Mercantile. The ownership documents listed me as the sole member. The state sales tax registration and the city vendor's license would be reissued in my name. I kept waiting for him to mention Valerie or Dad. He didn't. I looked at Grandma. "You're giving me the shop? I'm putting it where it already lives," she said. "What does Dad think?" "He doesn't." I thought she meant he didn't agree. Then she added, "Because I haven't told him." Aaron folded his hands. "Elizabeth has the right to make this change," he said. "The storefront lease, inventory, business accounts, and operating authority will move under the company. Your grandmother will remain involved as long as she chooses, but legally, you'll own and operate the business." I stared at the papers. This is going to cause a problem. Grandma's mouth tightened. "Only if somebody thinks work and ownership are unrelated. Valerie will think you're punishing her." I offered her work here. I knew exactly what Grandma meant. The summer before, she'd asked Valerie if she wanted to learn the business. Valerie had said she couldn't build a life around jam samples. Grandma slid the folder toward me. "Your father loves both of you," she said, "but Kenneth gives things to whoever makes him feel most needed. Your sister is very good at needing an audience." I looked down at the first page. Why keep it quiet? Because I'm still alive, and I'd like some peace. That answer sounded so much like her that I smiled. She didn't. "I'm serious, Paige. Keep the records safe. Don't use them to win an argument. Use them if an argument starts making decisions for you." I signed where Aaron showed me. Grandma gave me the recipe box afterward. Inside were her handwritten recipes, vendor names, old receipts, and a sealed envelope with my name on it. I read the letter that night in my apartment. She wrote that I had saved the shop without making her feel like it had stopped being hers. She wrote that ownership should follow responsibility. Then she told me not to confuse silence with surrender. I put the letter back in the envelope and locked the business papers in a fireproof document case. Grandma died in 2021. After the funeral, Dad started speaking about the shop as if it were the last shared room in a family house. "We need to keep your grandmother's legacy going," he said. I agreed with that part. I didn't tell him about the ownership documents. Grandma had asked for peace while she was alive. After she died, there never seemed to be a good moment to introduce a fact that would sound like a challenge. Also, nothing required me to. I paid the taxes, I renewed the licenses, I signed the supplier agreements. Dad sometimes changed a light fixture or repaired a loose hinge. Mom brought seasonal decorations and volunteered during Christmas weekends. Valerie stayed in Chicago. The shop was legally mine, but in everyday family conversation, it remained ours. That distinction didn't seem dangerous yet. By the end of 2025, Morris Mercantile had become one of those places visitors mentioned when they told other people about Galena. We shipped gift boxes to more than 30 states. We carried products from small Illinois producers. Joseph managed the floor and trained the part-time staff. I handled suppliers, bookkeeping, events, licensing, and everything that broke after 5. Tourists sometimes told me we were the reason they stopped on Main Street. My parents still introduced me as the one who stayed. Then, in January of 2026, Valerie's fitness studio in Chicago collapsed. At first, I only knew it had closed. Mom said the landlord had been unreasonable. Dad said Valerie's business partner had mishandled things. Valerie moved back to Galena in February with a rented truck, a storage unit full of exercise equipment, and no clear plan. Mom called me the morning after she arrived. "Your sister needs something positive," she said. I was in the stockroom checking an invoice. "What does that mean?" "It means she needs family. She's staying with you." "That isn't what I'm talking about." I waited. Mom lowered her voice, though there was nobody with her who needed protecting. "Your father and I think the shop could be a fresh start for Valerie." I looked through the stockroom doorway toward the counter. Joseph was helping a customer choose a wedding gift. What would she do here? Bring new energy. Events, online promotion, wellness products. We already do events and online promotion. Paige, don't start. I asked what she'd do. Mom let out a slow breath. "She's your sister. She's had a terrible setback. You have something stable, and right now she doesn't." There it was. The family equation I already knew. I had stability, so stability could be taken from me in pieces. Valerie had need, so her need became a claim. I said, "She can apply for a position like anyone else." Mom went quiet, then she said, "I was hoping you'd be kinder than that." The call ended 2 minutes later. In March, Dad invited me to dinner at their house. Valerie was already at the table when I arrived. She had a notebook open beside her plate. Dad waited until Mom served the roast before he said, "We've been talking about the future of Morris Mercantile." I set down my fork. "We?" Valerie smiled carefully. Dad leaned back in his chair. "The shop needs a renovation," he said, "and your sister has some excellent ideas." That was the first moment I understood they weren't asking me to give Valerie a job. They had already decided they could give her the shop. I looked at Valerie's notebook. Across the top of the page, she had written, "Morris Mercantile Relaunch," in large block letters. Underneath it were columns labeled brand, build out, launch partners, and media. There wasn't a single note about inventory. "What kind of renovation?" I asked. Dad reached for the gravy. "Nothing extreme. Fresh paint, better lighting, a more open layout. Who has looked at the building?" "A contractor I know." "Who?" "Mark Dalton." I knew Mark. He'd repaired the back steps 2 summers earlier. He was competent, but he also believed every old wall was hiding a simple problem. "When did he inspect it?" Dad frowned. "Why does that matter? Because nobody inspected it with me." Valerie turned her notebook around. She had sketched a rough floor plan. The center shelves were gone. The tasting counter had been moved to the back, directly in front of the door we used for deliveries. One wall was labeled Wellness. "I want to bring in products that connect food with a healthier lifestyle," she said. "Supplements, clean snacks, maybe my own line eventually. We're licensed to sell food and kitchenware. So we update the license. It doesn't work like changing a profile picture." She gave me a small smile. "I owned a business, Paige. Then you know permits come before construction. Mom put the serving spoon down harder than necessary. Can we get through one meal without you treating every idea like an attack? I'm asking questions about the shop. Our shop, Dad said. He said it casually. That was what made me look at him. Grandma's papers were locked in my apartment. My name was on every license displayed behind the register. Dad had seen them. He'd stood beneath them while changing a ceiling light. Still, I wondered if he had never really read them. What exactly are you proposing? I asked. Dad wiped his mouth with his napkin. We invest in the building. Valerie leads the new direction. You continue handling the operational side. And what does Valerie control? Marketing, product development, events. I already handle those. You can't do everything forever, Mom said. I don't. Joseph handled most daily floor decisions. Our bookkeeper handled payroll. 2 local cooks coordinated demonstrations. I had spent years making sure the shop didn't depend on one person doing everything. Valerie tapped her pen against the notebook. This doesn't have to feel like I'm replacing you. That depends on what you're doing. I'm coming in at a leadership level. Based on what? Dad's chair shifted against the floor. That's enough. Valerie closed the notebook. Nobody spoke for several seconds. The refrigerator clicked on behind me. Then Mom picked up the serving spoon and asked if anybody wanted more carrots. After dinner, I helped her carry plates into the kitchen. She ran hot water over the roasting pan while I scraped leftovers into a glass container. You embarrassed your sister, she said. She brought a relaunch plan to dinner. She was excited. She drew over the delivery door. Mom turned off the faucet. You know what she's been through. I put the lid on the container. No, I don't. Every time I ask, you tell me it wasn't her fault. It wasn't. What happened to the studio? Her partner made bad decisions. What decisions? Mom reached for a dish towel. This is exactly what I mean. You want every private detail before you'll show basic compassion. I'm being asked to share control of my workplace. It's not just your workplace. There was a pause. I said, "Whose is it?" Mom looked at me, then back at the pan. It belongs to the family. That answer told me more than she intended. I had spent years assuming my parents understood the difference between helping at the shop and owning it. Maybe they did understand. Maybe they had simply decided the difference wasn't important. I dried the last plate and put it in the cabinet. Have Dad send me the renovation proposal? I said. Mom's shoulders relaxed. Good. That's all we're asking. No, I'm asking to see it. She looked disappointed again. On the drive home, I rehearsed several versions of the argument. In one, I told them everything. I described the meeting in Aaron's office and put Grandma's letter on the table. I explained that there was no family vote because there was no shared ownership. In another, I called Valerie and asked why she thought a failed studio qualified her to control a profitable shop. Every version ended the same way. Dad accused me of hiding things. Mom cried. Valerie said she had never wanted conflict. By the time I reached my apartment, I had decided not to call anyone. I took the fireproof case from the bedroom closet and set it on my kitchen table. The formation documents were exactly where I had left them. Morris Mercantile, LLC. My full name listed as sole member. The effective date was in June of 2019. Behind that was the state registration, then the city vendor's license, then an operating agreement Aaron had explained twice because I'd been nervous and kept losing my place. I read every page. Nothing had changed. That mattered, but it didn't answer the question that bothered me. My parents weren't behaving like people who wanted to suggest a renovation. They were behaving like people who believed permission had already been granted. The next morning, I bought a plain black notebook at the pharmacy before work. On the first page, I wrote the date of the dinner. Under it, I listed what each person had said as closely as I could remember. It felt excessive. Then I thought about Grandma telling me not to use the papers to win an argument. I wasn't trying to win one. I was trying to understand whether an argument had already started making decisions for me. The renovation proposal arrived 4 days later. Dad forwarded it at 9:20 in the evening with one sentence. Take a look. We're hoping to move fast. The estimate was preliminary. It covered paint, flooring, new fixtures, electrical work, exterior signage, and a redesigned checkout area. The total sat just under $38,000. The client line said Kenneth and Rhonda Morris. My name wasn't anywhere on it. I replied, "Who authorized Mark to prepare work for the shop?" Dad answered the next morning. We asked for an estimate. Nobody authorized construction. I wrote back, "Please don't schedule work or sign anything until we discuss it." He didn't respond. The following Monday, I arrived at 8 and found Mark measuring the front window. Dad stood near the entrance, holding a paper coffee cup. Valerie was beside him in black leggings and a cropped jacket, filming the empty shop on her phone. Joseph was behind the counter. He met my eyes when I came in. "Morning," Dad said. "What's happening?" "Mark needed a few measurements. I emailed you, and I told you nobody was starting construction." Mark lowered the tape measure. "I can come back," he said. "Yes," I said. Dad said, "No." We spoke at the same time. Mark looked between us. I set my bag behind the counter. "This is a working shop. We open in 40 minutes. I need written plans before anyone starts measuring for permanent changes." Valerie lowered her phone. "We're losing daylight. You're standing inside. The lights work." Joseph looked down quickly, but I saw his mouth tighten. Dad walked toward me. "Can we talk in the stockroom?" We went through the narrow door beside the register. He closed it behind us. "You're making this harder than it needs to be," he said. "You brought a contractor in without telling me. It's measuring tape, Paige. Then why couldn't it wait?" He put his coffee on a carton of olive oil. "Your sister needs momentum. She's been sitting at our house for weeks feeling like a failure. So you promised her my job. I promised her an opportunity, at a leadership level." He rubbed the side of his jaw. "You have always been practical. Valerie has vision. The shop needs both." "What vision?" "She understands where people are going. Her own business closed." His face changed. That was low. It was relevant. No, it was cruel. I looked at him. He'd asked me to work without pay during the worst winter the shop ever had. He'd told me I was sensible when I skipped vacations. He'd watched me move back into Grandma's spare room for 6 months because the apartment above the florist raised its rent. But asking why Valerie's business had closed was cruel. I opened the stockroom door. "Mark can finish the window measurements," I said. "Nothing else happens without written approval from me." Dad gave a short laugh. "Approval from you? Yes?" He picked up his coffee. "All right, boss." He said boss the way someone says princess. I let him walk out first. For the next 3 weeks, they kept making small moves. Nothing was large enough to justify a public fight. Mom brought in paint samples and taped them to the wall near the spices. Valerie created a new social media page using the shop's logo. Dad asked Joseph for copies of the alarm instructions. Each time, I stopped the immediate problem. I removed the paint samples. I reported the duplicate page. I told Joseph not to share security information with anyone. Then Mom called and said I was humiliating Valerie over tiny things. "They're tiny to you," I said. "You don't have to undo them. You're acting like we're strangers. Strangers usually ask before they make business pages in my name." It was the shop's name. That's the issue. She was silent for a moment. Then she said, "Your grandmother would hate this." I was standing at the kitchenware display when she said it. My hand was resting on a stack of folded linen towels. I almost answered. Instead, I said, "I have customers," and ended the call. Joseph waited until the store was empty that afternoon. He locked the register drawer, then came over with a shipping label stuck to his sleeve. "Can I tell you something without getting put in the middle?" "You're already in the middle." That's what I was afraid of. I peeled the label from his sleeve and handed it to him. What happened? A woman from the sign company called Friday. What sign company? Northridge Signs. She asked whether Valerie had final approval on the exterior lettering. I stared at him. "What did you say?" I said all approvals came from you. "And?" She got quiet. Then she said she'd been given a different contact sheet. "By who?" She didn't say. "Why didn't you tell me Friday? Your parents were here, and Valerie kept following me into the stockroom." He looked toward the door. "They're talking like you're leaving. I'm not leaving." "I know." "What exactly did they say?" "Your dad asked whether I'd be comfortable reporting to Valerie after the reopening. I told him I report to you. That was the useful part, not the sign company, not the contact sheet. After the reopening. They had a date in mind, and they were discussing the reporting structure with my manager before telling me." "Did he say when?" "No, just this summer. Did Valerie hear?" She was standing beside him. I went into the office and closed the door. For several minutes, I sat at the desk without turning on the computer. Then I opened the black notebook. I wrote down what Joseph had told me. I included the time, where we were standing, and the name of the sign company. After that, I called Northridge Signs. A woman named Claire answered. I introduced myself and asked if there was an open project for Morris Mercantile. "Yes," she said. "We have exterior lettering and an interior feature wall. Who authorized it?" There was a keyboard clicking in the background. "I have Valerie Morris listed as project contact. I asked who authorized it." Another pause. "The deposit came from Kenneth Morris. Was anyone identified as the business owner? I need to check the paperwork." "Please do." She put me on hold. I listened to instrumental music for almost 3 minutes. When she returned, her voice was more careful. "The form says the property is family operated and that ownership documents are being updated." "Updated to what?" "I don't have that information." "Did you receive a copy of the current city license?" "No." "Then don't manufacture or install anything. I'll have to discuss that with the person who paid the deposit." "You can discuss the deposit. You can't put signage on the storefront without approval from the licensed business operator." She asked me to email proof. I sent the current vendor's license before we ended the call. That evening, Valerie came into the shop 10 minutes before closing. She carried a clear plastic cup with the remains of an iced drink and set it near the register. "You canceled my sign order." I paused an unauthorized order. "Dad paid for it." "That doesn't authorize it." She folded her arms. "Why are you doing this? I could ask you the same thing. I'm trying to help our family business. You told a sign company the ownership documents were being updated." Her expression shifted. It was slight, but I saw it. "I didn't say that. It's on the contact form." "Then Dad probably filled it out." "What documents are being updated?" She picked up her cup again. "You need to talk to Dad. I'm talking to you. I don't handle paperwork. You owned a studio. That doesn't mean I filled out every form myself." Joseph was in the back, finishing a count. Valerie glanced toward the stockroom door. Then she lowered her voice. "Mom warned me you'd get possessive." "Possessive of what?" She stared at me. For the first time, neither of us used the word family. Finally, she said, "Grandma didn't build that place for one person. She built it for customers. I built the business it is now, and you've been paid." I felt my hand tighten around the edge of the counter. "So that settles it?" "I didn't say that. You just did." She picked up her bag. "I'm not fighting with you in the middle of the store. We're closed. That's not the point." She walked out, leaving the plastic cup on the counter. I threw it away and locked the door. In April, I received a forwarded email from Mark. He thought I had been included in the earlier messages. Attached were revised renovation drawings, a schedule, and a rendering of the new sign. The work was supposed to begin in early June. The reopening date was listed as July 14th. The interior rendering showed Valerie's wellness wall, a media corner, and a small office where our shipping supplies were stored. The exterior sign still said Morris Mercantile, but underneath it, in smaller lettering, were the words, "Curated by Valerie Morris." I printed the entire email chain. Buried near the bottom was a message from Dad. "Paige is cautious about changes, but we'll handle her. Keep moving." I added it to the folder with my notes. Then I started checking everything I normally trusted to remain still. I reviewed the business bank accounts. No unfamiliar names had been added. I checked the insurance policies, supplier contracts, payroll access, and the domain registration for our website. Nothing had changed. That should have reassured me. It didn't. In early May, I stayed late on a Tuesday to renew a temporary permit for summer tastings. The The city portal showed the permit, our vendor's license, and a yellow notice beside the business account. One filing pending review. I clicked it. The page took several seconds to load. Change of responsible party appeared across the top. The current responsible party was Paige Morris. The proposed responsible party was Valerie Morris. The submission date was 3 weeks earlier. I opened the scanned form. Near the bottom, beneath a statement saying I consented to the change, was a signature written in my name. It wasn't mine. I stared at it until the letters stopped looking like my name. The signature wasn't a close imitation. Whoever had written it had copied the large P.I. used on invoices, but the rest slanted backward. My real signature leaned forward and ended with a short line under the final S. This one ended in a loop. Below it was a notary section. The form said I had appeared in person before Renee Hall and sworn that I approved the change. There was a seal beside Renee's name. I knew Renee. Not well, but Galena isn't large enough for a shop owner to avoid knowing the people who notarize documents. She worked from an office near Bench Street and had notarized a supplier affidavit for me the year before. I had not seen her in months. I downloaded the filing, then took screenshots of every page in the portal. I included the account number, submission date, and pending status. After that, I printed 2 copies. The printer sounded unusually loud in the empty office. I put 1 copy in the black folder and folded the other into my bag. Then I logged out of the portal and checked the door between the office and the sales floor. It was locked. Nobody was there. I still changed the password. The next morning, I called the city licensing office as soon as it opened. Thomas Franklin answered. I had spoken to him several times over the years. He was patient with ordinary questions and impatient with people who expected city rules to disappear because they owned a nice building. Business licensing. This is Thomas. Hi, Thomas. It's Paige Morris from Morris Mercantile. Good morning. Did that tasting permit go through? That's what I was checking when I found something else. I told him the filing number. I didn't tell him the whole family situation. I said only that I had not submitted or signed the change. His keyboard clicked. Give me a moment. I stood behind the counter with one hand pressed to my other ear. The shop hadn't opened yet, but Joseph was moving boxes near the front window. Thomas stopped typing. All right, he said. I see it. Is it approved? No, it's in review. Who submitted it? I can't give you account information until I verify your identity. What do you need? He asked for the business identification number, the address, and the last renewal date. I answered from memory. Then he asked, Did you sign a consent form on April 16th? No. Did you appear before Renee Hall that day? No. There was another pause. Are you able to come to the office? When? Today would be best. I looked at the clock. I can be there at 11. Bring identification and examples of your signature, something already connected to the business. What happens to the filing until then? It stays pending. I'm adding an internal note that direct verification is required. Can someone approve it before 11? No. He said it plainly. That was the first full breath I took that morning. At 10:45, Joseph came into the office. I can cover, he said. I didn't ask yet. You've checked your bag 4 times and you haven't had coffee. I looked down. My hand was holding the zipper. I have to go to City Hall. Is it about the renovation? Yes. That wasn't the whole answer, but it was enough for then. I handed him the store phone. Don't give anyone access to the office. Anyone meaning your family? Anyone means anyone. He nodded. The city offices weren't far from Main Street, but I drove because I didn't want to walk through town carrying a folder with my forged signature inside it. Thomas met me at the licensing counter. He was wearing a pale blue shirt with the sleeves rolled to his elbows. Come around, he said. He led me through a short hallway to a small meeting room. There was a round table, 4 gray chairs, and a framed map of Galena on the wall. I gave him my identification. He compared it to the license record, then made a copy. What signature examples did you bring? I handed him the latest vendor renewal, a supplier agreement, and a copy of the LLC operating agreement. He placed the disputed filing beside them. He didn't say anything at first. He lined up the signature pages and moved them closer to the window. "This one isn't consistent," he said. "No, your capital letters are different. So is the spacing." "I didn't sign it." "I understand." He studied the notary section. "Renee's commission information is current. Does that make it valid?" "No. It means someone used the name and number of a real notary." I sat back. "Can I see who uploaded it now?" Thomas turned the disputed form toward himself. "I can tell you it came through a professional account. I can't release the account holder's information based on a verbal dispute." "What kind of professional account? An attorney, accountant, or authorized filing service? Can you tell which one?" "Yes. But you can't tell me. Not until you file a written fraud report or we receive authorization from the account holder." I looked at the loop beneath my name. "What do I need for the report? Your statement, identification, signature comparisons, any supporting documentation. I'd also want something from the notary if she says this isn't hers. Will the person who submitted it be notified? Once a formal report is opened, probably." That mattered. I didn't want my parents warned before I knew how far this went. I also didn't know yet whether Dad, Mom, or Valerie had touched the actual filing. All three were acting as though the transfer was expected. That didn't tell me who had signed my name. Thomas watched me think. "Do you know the proposed responsible party?" he asked. "She's my sister." His eyes moved to the form and back. "Does she believe she has your consent?" I don't know. That was true. I knew Valerie had accepted the idea of taking control. I knew she'd told a sign company that ownership documents were being updated. I didn't know whether she had seen this page. Thomas placed a small yellow note on the file. "I'm not approving anything with a disputed signature," he said. "But I can't investigate a family disagreement without a formal statement. It's not a family disagreement, then document why it isn't." He gave me a checklist and his direct email address. Before I left, I asked, if this had been approved, what would have changed? The city's responsible party record, possibly the vendor license, depending on the supporting state documentation. Would it have transferred ownership of the LLC? No. A city form can't change company ownership, so it wouldn't make Valerie the owner. No. Then why file it? Thomas considered his answer. It would make her appear to be the authorized operator. That can be used to request other changes. Bank access? Not by itself. Vendor accounts? Depends on the vendor. The register? That depends on how your sales system verifies the responsible party. I folded the checklist. The filing wasn't enough to take the company from me. It was enough to make other people believe the process had begun. That was the complication I hadn't considered. My parents didn't need one document to do everything. They needed it to support the next document and then the next explanation. When I returned to the shop, Dad was waiting near the tasting counter. He had a roll of drawings under his arm. "Where were you?" he asked. "At an appointment." "What appointment?" "Why?" "We're trying to coordinate a construction schedule." "You don't need my medical history to schedule paint." His expression changed. "I didn't say it was medical. You asked like it was." Joseph was helping a customer, but I could tell he was listening. Dad unrolled the drawings on the counter. Mark revised the layout. "He kept your delivery path open." "Good. We want to begin the first week of June. I have an approved construction." He tapped the drawing. "We went through everything you objected to. No, you moved one shelf. Paige, your mother and I are paying for this. I didn't ask you to. That doesn't mean you have to fight us." I looked at his right hand. There was a dark blue ink mark on the side of his middle finger. It meant nothing. Dad used pens. He filled out forms. He wrote grocery lists. Still, I looked. He noticed. "What?" "Nothing." I rolled the plans back toward him. "I need copies of the contracts and permit applications. Mark handles permits. I need copies." "You don't trust anybody. I trust documents." His face tightened at that. For 1 second, I thought he knew what I'd found. Then he said, "Your sister has already announced the reopening date." "Where?" "Online." I picked up my phone. Valerie had posted a photograph of herself outside the shop. Behind her, the awning and front windows were visible. The caption said she was thrilled to bring new life to a family landmark and invited everyone to save July 14th for the grand reopening. There was no mention of me. The post had already been shared by the local tourism page. I set the phone down. Tell her to remove it. Dad laughed once. Why? Because there's no approved construction schedule. The date is 2 months away. That doesn't create approval. You can't keep saying that word like it ends every conversation. In the shop, it does. He stared at me. Then he gathered the drawings and walked out. Mom called before lunch. What did you say to your father? That construction isn't approved. He came home shaking. Dad did not shake. He got quiet and made everybody else describe him as wounded. I asked for permits and contracts. You made him feel like a criminal. My eyes went to the folder in the office. What an odd word. What is that supposed to mean? Nothing. Don't do that. Do what? Talk in these little riddles like you know something the rest of us don't. A customer came through the door. The bell gave its clean ring. I have to work. Your father is trying to help you. He's planning changes to a business he doesn't operate. You wouldn't have that business without his mother. I lowered my voice. I know exactly who gave me that business. Mom stopped speaking. I wondered if I'd said too much. Then she answered, Elizabeth wanted it to stay in the family, not you. The family. She still didn't know. Take down the reopening post, I said. It's Valerie's page. It uses my storefront. You're being impossible. She ended the call. The post stayed up. For the rest of May, I watched the pending filing every morning. The status didn't change. I also started taking the black folder home each night. I no longer left it in the office, even in the locked cabinet. Dad sent contracts only after I asked twice. They described cosmetic work, new electrical outlets, fixtures, flooring, and signage. He had signed as project sponsor. The owner authorization line was blank. Mark called me directly. I need that signature before I pull permits, he said. You'll get a decision after I review the scope. Your dad thought you'd already agreed. I haven't. He said it was a family building. He knows the business has one authorized operator. Mark cleared his throat. I don't want to be in the middle. Then don't start work without the right signature. He agreed. 2 days later, Valerie came in with a photographer to take pictures of the shelves before they were moved. I stood near the front counter. What are these for? Reopening materials. The renovation isn't approved. She adjusted the belt of her jacket. Dad said Mark's waiting on a technicality. My consent isn't a technicality. Everything with you is paperwork. Not everything. Just things involving the business. The photographer lowered the camera. Valerie looked toward him. Give us a second. He stepped outside. She came closer to me. I'm trying very hard not to take this personally. Try harder. Her mouth opened, then closed. You know I need this. That doesn't make it yours. I never said it was mine. You're advertising a grand reopening under your name. Because I have a following. You have people who follow you. That isn't the same as owning what's behind you. Her face went still. Then she said, Dad told me the legal side was being handled. I watched her carefully. What legal side? The business structure. What about it? He said things were outdated after Grandma died. Nothing about the business structure had become outdated when Grandma died. The company had belonged to me for 2 years by then. What did he tell you was changing? She reached for the strap of her bag. You need to ask him. I'm asking what you know. I know he spent weeks working with someone to make this possible. Someone who, I don't know. I believed the last part less than the rest. She called the photographer back inside and took pictures without me. I let her. That evening, I emailed Thomas and asked whether the professional account had submitted supporting state paperwork. He replied the next morning. A related change request had been initiated, but the state record still showed me as the registered responsible party. He told me to contact Renee before filing my statement. I waited until the first week of June, when I knew Renee would be in her office. I brought the disputed form in a sealed envelope. Her office was small and neat, with 2 visitor chairs and a cabinet full of logbooks. She put on reading glasses before she opened the envelope. "Where did you get this?" she asked. "The city licensing portal." She looked at the seal. Then she looked at me. "I didn't notarize this." "Can you be sure?" "Yes." She stood, unlocked the cabinet, and pulled out a thick black logbook. "What date?" "April 16th. She turned through the pages and ran her finger down the entries. There were 6 notarizations listed that day. None of them were for me. Renee rotated the book so I could see it. "You've been here before," she said. "You know I require identification, a signature, and a thumbprint in my book." I remembered. The ink had stayed on my thumb for the rest of the afternoon. "There's no entry for me." "No. Could someone have used your seal?" "My seal stays locked here." She picked up the disputed form again. "This isn't even an impression from my seal. It's an image." She pointed to the edge. The circle looked slightly blurred where it crossed the printed line. "Someone copied it," I said. "Yes." Renee removed her glasses, and whoever did it put my commission number on a forged notarization. She reached for a legal pad. "I'm making a record of this conversation. You should do the same." I took out my notebook. Renee wrote the date, the time I arrived, and the filing number. Then she made a copy of the disputed form and marked the place where the copied seal crossed the printed line. "I want a copy of your identification," she said. I handed it to her. She copied that too, then returned the original. "Will you give me something in writing?" I asked. "Yes. I'll state that you did not appear before me on April 16th, that my log contains no entry for you, and that the image on this filing did not come from my physical seal. Can I have a copy of the log page? You can have a certified copy. I'll block the personal information from the other entries." She went to the copier. I stayed at her desk and looked at the form again. Until then, part of me had still been waiting for an explanation involving carelessness. Maybe Dad had misunderstood something. Maybe Valerie had been shown a blank form and assumed I'd sign later. Maybe somebody had selected the wrong option in an online portal. A copied notary seal wasn't careless. Someone had taken an image attached to a real official act and placed it beside my fake signature. They had made the document look complete because they knew it wasn't. Renee returned with the copy. "Do you recognize the seal image?" I asked. She leaned over it. "I've used this layout for years. It could have come from almost any document I notarized. Did you notarize anything for my father recently?" She checked the index in the front of the logbook. "Not this year." "What about Valerie?" "No." "Could someone request an old document containing your seal?" "Depending on the document, yes." "Would you remember doing work for Aaron King?" Her eyes lifted. "Aaron sends people here sometimes." "Why?" "He handled the company formation for the shop. And you think his office prepared this?" "I don't know who prepared it. That was still true." Renee sat down again. "I'll call Thomas," she said. "The misuse of my commission information concerns me separately from whatever your family is doing. What will you tell him?" "Exactly what I told you. Will he tell the person who submitted the form? He may have to." I closed the notebook. "I need a little time before that happens." She studied me. "How much?" "A day." "Why?" "Because if this came through someone I know, I want my records before anybody starts deleting emails." Renee considered that. "I'll finish my statement today. I'll call Thomas tomorrow morning." "Thank you." She pointed at the disputed form. "Do not let anyone convince you this is a misunderstanding. A misunderstanding doesn't copy a seal." I put her statement and the log page inside the folder. When I stepped outside, the afternoon was warm enough that people were carrying their jackets. I sat in my car with the doors locked and called Aaron's office. His assistant said he was in meetings until 4. "Tell him it concerns Morris Mercantile," I said, "and ask him not to call my father before he speaks to me." She paused. "All right." I drove back to the shop. Joseph was labeling a delivery of maple syrup. Dad's truck was parked across the street, but he wasn't inside. Has he been here? I asked. About 20 minutes ago. What did he want? The key to the basement access. Did you give it to him? No, I told him you had it. The basement door could only be reached through the stockroom. It held the furnace, old shelving, and boxes of records Grandma had never thrown away. Did he say why? Electrical inspection. There isn't one scheduled. That's what I thought. Joseph lowered his voice. He opened the office door. What? He tried the handle. It was locked. Did he ask you to open it? No. He saw me watching and said he was looking for a tape measure. There were 3 tape measures in the stockroom. I went into the office and checked the cabinet. Nothing appeared disturbed. The computer was locked. The black folder was in my bag. I changed the office door code anyway. At 4:12, Aaron called. Paige, your message sounded urgent. Did your office prepare a change of responsible party filing for Morris Mercantile? He didn't answer immediately. Yes, he said. I believe we did. Who asked you to? Your father. I turned my chair toward the closed office door. When? Early April. What did he tell you? He said the family was restructuring management after Valerie returned. Did he say I agreed? He said you had all discussed it. That isn't what I asked. Aaron's voice became more formal. He represented that you consented to Valerie becoming the responsible operating party. Did you speak to me? No. Did anyone in your office speak to me? Not that I'm aware of. Then whose signature is on the form? Another pause. Paige, are you saying you didn't sign it? I'm saying I was never shown it. Where are you? At the shop. Can you come to my office? Yes. Bring the document. I have it. I told Joseph I was leaving early. He looked at my bag. Do you need me to come? No. It was the first time he'd offered, and I almost said yes. Instead, I told him to lock the office after closing and leave through the front. I didn't want him alone in the back if Dad returned asking for basement access. Aaron was waiting at the top of the stairs when I arrived. He took me straight into his conference room and closed the door. The recipe box had sat beside Grandma's chair in that same room 7 years earlier. The table had been replaced, but the framed photograph of Main Street was still on the wall. I put the copy of the filing in front of him. Aaron adjusted his glasses and read it. His face changed when he reached the signature. Is this the version your office submitted? I asked. I need to compare it. He left the room and returned with a paper file. He opened it beside mine. The forms matched. He looked at the notary section, then at me. Did you appear before Renee Hall? No, I'm asking because this is serious. I understand what you're asking. Do you have proof? I placed Renee's signed statement on the table. He read it twice. Then I gave him the copy of the logbook page. Aaron removed his glasses. I prepared the change form, he said. I did not prepare or apply this signature. Who did you send it to? Your father. Did you send it directly to him? Yes. How? Email. And how did the completed version come back? He looked through his file. Email from Kenneth. My father hadn't just mentioned a restructuring to a family friend. He had requested the document, accepted the blank signature page, and returned it with my name forged across the bottom. Aaron had the email. If you know why I stopped trusting explanations at that point, leave the word receipt in the comments. Print it, I said. Aaron looked at me. All of it. He went to his computer. The email chain was 9 pages long. Dad's first message said Valerie had returned to Galena and would be taking a primary role in the shop. He asked what was necessary to place her on city and state records. Aaron had replied that Morris Mercantile, LLC, was held by one member, me, and that any change required my direct consent. He also wrote that changing the responsible party wouldn't transfer the company itself. Dad answered less than an hour later. Paige is fully on board. She's overwhelmed at the store and asked me to coordinate. I read that sentence twice. The next messages discussed filing fees, the city form, and the need for notarized consent. Aaron emailed a blank form and told Dad I had to sign it before a notary. Dad replied, "Understood." 3 days later, he sent back the completed page. The message contained 4 words. Paige got it handled. Aaron had then submitted it through his professional account. I placed the pages in order. What did my father pay you for this? $500, including the filing fees. Which account paid? His personal checking account, not the shop? No. Did Valerie contact you? He hesitated. She called once. When? The day after I submitted the filing. What did she ask? Whether the change would be complete before the reopening. What did you tell her? That timing depended on the city and state. Did she ask whether I had signed? No. Did you mention that my consent was required? I told her the consent had been received. I sat back. So she knew there was a consent form. She knew paperwork had been completed. Completed by me. That was the information I had. Aaron placed both hands on the table. I relied on your father's representation and a document that appeared notarized. If I'd known there was any disagreement, I would have contacted you directly. You had the LLC documents in your office. Yes. They showed I was the only member. Yes. But when Dad said I agreed, you didn't verify it with me. The notarization was supposed to be that verification. No. The notarization was supposed to verify my signature. You never asked whether I wanted the document prepared. He looked down at the email chain. You're right. There was no argument in his voice. That made me angrier than an excuse would have. I asked, did Dad tell you why this had to happen before July? He said Valerie needed formal authority to negotiate with vendors and oversee the relaunch. Did he call it a relaunch? Yes. Did he say I was leaving? No. He said you would continue running operations. That was the role they had assigned me at dinner. I was supposed to keep doing the work while Valerie gained the authority to speak over it. What happens now? I asked. I notified the city that the filing was submitted based on false information. Not yet. Aaron's eyes lifted. I can't leave a document I now know is false sitting in a government system. I'm not asking you to lie. You're asking me to delay correcting it. I'm asking you to preserve your records before you contact my father. He was quiet. I'll preserve everything. Emails, attachments, billing records, file notes, and the original document. Yes, I want copies. I can give you copies of communications concerning the company because you're its sole member. Some material involving your father may require review. He approached you about changing my company record. I understand. Did he sign an engagement letter? Yes. Who does it identify as the client? Aaron opened another section of the file. Kenneth Morris. Individually. Then this wasn't a company instruction. No. Did he ever give you written authority from me? No. The answer sat between us. Dad had hired Aaron personally. He had paid personally. He had represented that I consented. Then he had returned a document bearing a false signature and a copied notary seal. The renovation was no longer the center of the problem. The shelves, paint, signs, and reopening post were cover. They made the transfer look like the natural paperwork behind a family project. I had been treating each intrusion as a boundary issue. Dad had been building a paper trail. Aaron copied the file while I waited. He included the emails, invoice, engagement letter, submitted form, and electronic filing confirmation. When he returned, he handed me the stack in a large white envelope. I'm going to notify my professional insurer, he said. That's your decision. I also need to speak to Thomas. Renee is calling him tomorrow. He looked surprised. You already spoke to her? This morning. Aaron nodded slowly. Then the city will open a review. Not without my formal statement. You intend to file one? Yes. I hadn't decided when, but I knew I would. He folded his glasses and set them on the table. I'm sorry, Paige. Did you tell Dad where Grandma's original ownership documents were kept? No. Did he ask? Aaron looked toward the paper file. He asked whether my office still had copies. When? During the first meeting. What did you say? I said we did. Did he ask to see them? Yes. Did you show him? I showed him the filed formation record. That's when I explained you were the sole member. That answer removed the last possibility that Dad simply didn't understand. He had sat in this office. He had seen the document with my name on it. He had been told what it meant. Then he had gone forward anyway. Did he seem surprised? I asked. No, that was the part I hadn't expected. Dad hadn't discovered the ownership structure while trying to help Valerie. He already knew it stood between them and the shop. What exactly did he say when you told him I had to consent? Aaron stared at the file for a moment. He said, Paige won't stand in the way once she understands this is for her sister. I put the papers into my bag. Don't call him tonight. I can give you until tomorrow morning. After that, I have obligations. That's enough. I left the office and drove to the shop. It was after closing. Joseph had gone home. The lights over the display windows were still on, making the empty shelves look warmer than they were. Dad's truck was parked at the curb. He stood inside with Valerie and Mark. The three of them were looking at paint samples on the wall. I stayed in my car. Through the window, Dad pointed toward the counter, then toward the framed licenses behind it. Valerie said something I couldn't hear. Mark wrote on his clipboard. Dad believed I was still objecting to flooring and signs. He didn't know I had his emails in my bag. My phone rang. Mom's name appeared on the screen. I answered. We need to have lunch, she said. About what? About why you're making this so ugly for your sister. I agreed to meet her the next day. Mom chose a small restaurant near the river where she knew the owner. She arrived before me and had already ordered iced tea for both of us. There was a folder beside her purse. I sat down across from her. You brought paperwork, I said. It's just information. What information? She slid the menu toward me. Can we order first? I'm not hungry. Paige. What did you bring? She looked around the room. Only 2 other tables were occupied. Your father says the construction can't begin because you won't sign the owner authorization. That's correct. He's already paid deposits. I told him not to. He's trying to invest in the shop. Then he should have asked the person who owns it. Mom's fingers tightened around her glass. You've never spoken about it that way before. I've never needed to. It was Elizabeth's shop. Yes. And Kenneth is her son. Yes. You're making it sound like he's some stranger trying to steal from you. I watched her face. She didn't know I'd been to Aaron's office. If she had known, she would have started with an explanation. Why does Dad believe he can change the responsible party without me? I asked. Her eyes dropped to the menu. Those forms are Aaron's area. That wasn't my question. Your father said the business records needed updating. Did he tell you I consented? He said you would. That's different. The server approached, and Mom ordered soup and half a sandwich for both of us. I let her. We sat without speaking until the server walked away. Then Mom opened the folder. Inside were printed renovation estimates, product mock-ups, and a schedule for the reopening. The top page showed Valerie smiling beside a line of packaged snack mixes. The label said, Valerie Morris Wellness, exclusively at Morris Mercantile. Those don't exist, I said. They're samples. Who made them? Valerie designed the labels. Who is producing the food? We're still working on that. You can't put our shop name on food from an unknown producer. That's the kind of detail you're good at. I looked up. She meant it as praise. You want me to make Valerie's products legal and sellable. We want you to help. While she owns the brand, why does everything have to be about ownership? Because you're transferring business authority to her. Mom moved the mock-up aside. This could bring in real money. The shop already brings in real money for Valerie. There it was. I closed the folder. How much does she owe? Mom's lips parted, but she didn't answer. I asked again. How much debt did the studio leave her? She doesn't owe all of it personally. How much? It's complicated. Give me the uncomplicated number. Mom looked toward the window. A little under $80,000. I sat still. The restaurant's air conditioner clicked on. A paper napkin near the empty table beside us lifted at one corner. 80,000, I said. Roughly. You told me her partner made bad decisions. He did. That doesn't answer why Valerie owes $80,000. She signed personal guarantees. There was equipment financing, the lease, business cards, and money owed to instructors. How much does her partner owe? We don't know what can be recovered from him. Does Valerie? She's working with someone. An attorney? A debt advisor? I lean back. So this isn't about giving her a place to work. It's about giving her something to rebuild with. Something profitable. Something stable. The same word she'd used on the phone in February. I had something stable. Valerie didn't. Mom reached across the table. I moved my hand before she touched it. She could work at the shop, I said. She could earn a salary. That wouldn't be enough. For what? To get her life back. She owes more than the shop should pay any employee. She needs ownership in something successful. Why? Because people in Chicago think she failed. She did fail. Mom's face hardened. You don't have to enjoy saying it. I don't enjoy any of this. You've always resented that she wanted more. I stared at her. I spent 10 years making that store profitable, and nobody is taking that away from you. You're putting her name on the products, the marketing, the licenses, and the grand reopening. What part am I keeping? You would still run the business. The soup arrived. Neither of us touched it. Mom waited until the server left, then lowered her voice. Valerie is good in front of people. You know that, and I'm good behind the counter. That's not what I meant. It's exactly what you meant. She picked up her spoon, moved it through the soup, and put it down again. Your father thinks the shop can support both of you. It already could. That wasn't the offer. What offer would satisfy you? One where nobody signs my name. Her head came up. For a second, I thought I'd gone too far. Then she said, "What are you talking about?" I watched her carefully. She looked confused, not frightened, not guilty. Did Dad show you the change form? No. Did you know it required my notarized signature? He said Aaron was handling all of that. Did Valerie know? You'd have to ask her. I am asking what you know. Mom pushed her soup away. I knew the process was being expedited because of the reopening date. Expedited how? Your father has known Aaron for years. He thought it would be easier than starting with somebody new. And you didn't wonder why I wasn't involved? We assumed you'd come around. Before or after the paperwork? She didn't answer. I opened the folder again and looked through the estimates. Some had deposit stamps. Others had handwritten notes in Dad's block printing. On the flooring quote, he had written paid in full beside an amount of $12,000. Where is this money coming from? Mom reached for the folder. I held the page. Where? Our home equity line. I looked at her. You borrowed against the house. We have plenty of equity. How much did you borrow? It's manageable. How much? She took a long breath. $45,000. The renovation estimate I had seen was lower than that. The extra money covered signage, packaging, photography, event rentals, and initial production for Valerie's proposed products. You've already drawn it? Yes. How much is spent? Most of it is committed. To contracts I didn't approve. Your father thought the transfer would be finished. There was no hesitation in her answer. That was the full shape of it. Valerie owed roughly $80,000. My parents had borrowed $45,000 against their house to place her at the front of a profitable business. Dad needed the license change because vendors, contractors, and the register still recognized me. The grand reopening wasn't a celebration after the transfer. It was part of the transfer. Once Valerie had been photographed with the keys, introduced as the new owner, and placed on the wall beside a license carrying her name, my objection would look like a late attack. My parents expected the town to see the decision before I could explain the paperwork. Then they expected me to keep working because that was what I had always done. I put the estimate back in the folder. What happens if the transfer doesn't go through? Mom blinked. It will. What if it doesn't? Your father has handled it. That isn't an answer. She straightened the edge of her napkin. We would have to make the payments ourselves. On $45,000, we can afford the payments. From retirement income? Your father has savings. Did you plan to repay the loan from shop revenue? Mom's silence answered. You were going to use my business to pay for the renovation you forced on it. It's a family investment. No, it's your home equity debt. The improvements stay with the shop. And Valerie gets the public credit. You don't need public credit. The sentence came easily to her. I looked down at the untouched sandwich. Why not? Because you know what you've done. That doesn't pay me for giving it away. Nobody asked you to give it away. You asked me to keep doing the work while Valerie becomes the owner people see. Mom's face tightened. She needs this more than you do. There was no cruelty in her voice. That was what made the sentence exact. She believed need settled ownership. I stood and placed enough cash beside my glass to cover both meals. Mom looked up at me. Please sit down. I'm going back to work. Paige, don't make this ugly. I didn't forge anything. Her face lost color. I picked up my bag. What did you find? She asked. I didn't answer. Paige. I walked out. Valerie was at the shop when I returned. She was in the office doorway holding the new code pad in her hand. Joseph stood several feet behind her. I told her she couldn't go in, he said. Valerie turned. You changed the code? Yes. Why? You don't work here. Dad asked me to look for the old event calendars. Dad doesn't control the office. She looked at my bag. Mom called. That was quick. What did you say to her? The truth. Which truth? I unlocked the office, stepped inside, and faced her from the doorway. How much do you owe? Her eyes moved toward Joseph. Can we not do this in front of staff? Joseph already knows you're trying to become his boss. I never said that. Dad did. Joseph said he did. Valerie looked at him. This is a family conversation. You're discussing his job. She folded her arms. The debt is my private business. Not when Mom and Dad borrow against their house to install you in mine. Her expression changed. They told you about that? Were they supposed to keep it quiet? They didn't want you panicking over the amount. $45,000 is an amount worth noticing. It's an investment. That's Mom's word. Because that's what it is. In your brand. In the store. Then why is your name on the product labels? She rubbed her forehead. Because I can sell them. Have you sold any? They haven't launched. So no. Joseph walked toward the front. I'll be at the register, he said. When he was out of hearing range, I asked, what did Dad tell you about the ownership paperwork? Valerie looked tired rather than surprised. He said he was handling it. Did he tell you I signed? He said you agreed in principle. I didn't. I know that now. When did you learn? When you started blocking everything. That was before the filing was submitted. She shook her head. I don't know the exact dates. You called Aaron after he submitted it. Her face went still. Aaron told you? What did you ask him? I asked whether it would be ready before the reopening. Did you ask whether I had signed? Why would I? Because you knew I hadn't agreed. Dad said you would. That's not consent. I thought you were being difficult because you didn't want me involved. I didn't know you were putting your name on government records. Valerie looked toward the sales floor. He told me it was a responsible party change, not an ownership transfer. He also told you it was being handled through his connections. He said Aaron could move it faster, and you chose not to ask how. I trusted Dad. You benefited from not asking. She stared at me. Then she said, what do you want me to do? Go back to Chicago and let creditors take everything? I want you to stop taking things from me. I haven't taken anything yet, because the filing is still pending. That was the moment she knew I had seen it. Her voice dropped. Are you going to challenge it? Did you see the signed form? No. Did Dad tell you it required my notarized consent? He said there were forms. Did you believe I'd signed them? She took too long to answer. I believed he'd find a way to work it out. That was as close as Valerie came to admitting what she knew. She didn't forge my name. She didn't copy Renee's seal. She simply accepted a transfer that could only happen with my consent while knowing I hadn't given it. I asked, why the public reopening? Mom thinks it'll help with local coverage. That's not all. Valerie's hand tightened around the office code pad. If people see me running something successful, it changes the story. For your creditors, for everyone. There it was. They needed the shop to erase the picture of Valerie's failed studio. They needed photographs, products, a title, and a crowd. Dad's filing would make the paperwork appear settled. The ceremony would make the family decision appear settled. After both were in place, I was supposed to decide that correcting the lie would cost too much. They weren't expecting the paperwork to persuade me. They were expecting an audience to do it. I closed the office door. Valerie remained on the other side for a moment. Then I heard her set the code pad on the counter and leave. I called Thomas. "I'm ready to file the statement," I said. "Do you have documentation from Renee?" "Yes." "And signature samples?" "Yes. I'll need the company formation record and your current state registration. I have both. Bring originals if possible. We'll copy them here." I made an appointment for the next morning. Then I called Aaron. He had already notified Thomas that his professional account had submitted the form based on false information. He had also locked the electronic file so nobody in his office could alter or delete it. "Have you spoken to my father?" I asked. "No." "Has he called?" 3 times. "What did you tell him?" "That I couldn't discuss the filing while its authorization was disputed. So he knows there's a problem. He knows I won't discuss it. That's all. Keep it that way." Aaron was quiet for a second. "I can't coordinate strategy with you, Paige. I may be a witness. I'm not asking you to coordinate anything. I'm asking you not to warn the person who sent you a forged document." "That's fair." He agreed to send his written account directly to the city and state if requested. That night, I spread every document across my kitchen table. The LLC formation record came first. Then the operating agreement naming me as sole member. I added the state certificate of registration, the city vendor's license, Aaron's email chain, Renee's statement, the certified logbook page, and samples of my real signature. I put Dad's renovation emails in a separate section. They weren't necessary to prove the signature was false, but they showed why the filing existed. They also showed he had described the transfer as settled, while telling me he was only asking for measurements. Near midnight, I opened Grandma's recipe box. Her letter was beneath a divider, labeled preserves. I read the final page again. "If someone ever tells you the shop belongs to the family, ask whether they mean the family who worked for it or the family member who wants it." People get very vague when a clear answer would cost them something. I didn't include the letter in the fraud report. It wasn't legal proof. It was Grandma explaining my father years before I needed the explanation. The next morning, I carried the documents into the meeting room at City Hall. Thomas had arranged 2 stacks of forms on the table. One was the city fraud statement. The other contained instructions for disputing the related state filing. He checked the originals against the copies himself. "This formation record is current," he said. "Yes, no amendments since 2019? No. No transfer of membership? No." He pulled up the state business database on his computer. Morris Mercantile LLC appeared as active. My name remained connected to the company record and tax registration. Thomas printed the page and wrote the date across the bottom. Then he compared my current identification to the copy taken during the previous meeting. "Why do I have to verify twice?" I asked. "Because I'm documenting that the person disputing the signature is the same person on the license. That makes sense. I wish everyone felt that way." He placed the disputed form in front of me. The signature looked worse each time I saw it. Thomas pointed to the responsible party statement. "This form alone could not transfer your LLC ownership. It could, if approved with matching state documentation, change who the city recognizes as the person operating under the license. And it can't be approved without my consent, not while you remain the sole member and registered responsible party. What if my father submits another form? It would face the same requirement. What if he uses another attorney? The requirement doesn't change. What if he holds a ceremony and gives Valerie keys?" Thomas looked at me. "That has no effect on a business license." I signed the fraud statement in front of him. My real signature sat 3 inches below the false one. He watched me sign, copied my identification again, and stamped the packet received. "What happens now?" I asked. "The pending city change is frozen and flagged for review. I'll attach Renee's statement and request the submission records from Erin. Will my family be notified?" The submitting professional account receives the status update. Erin already knows. Any broader notice comes through the review process. How long does that take? It depends on the state response and whether we need more information. The reopening is July 14th. I saw the announcement. They believe Valerie will be listed by then. She won't be. He said it without emphasis. I asked him to explain why. Your current license remains valid. The proposed change has no effect unless it's approved. With a fraud dispute, a denied signature, and a notary denying the act, it cannot move forward as submitted. Could they replace it before the reopening? Not without a valid filing and your actual notarized consent. I'm not giving that. Then the license stays in your name. That was the lever, not the email chain by itself. Not Dad's lie or Renee's logbook. Those proved what he had done. The license determined what he had failed to do. I left City Hall with a stamped copy of the report and written confirmation that the filing was frozen. From my car, I called the Illinois Department of Revenue. The first automated menu sent me to the wrong department. The second call disconnected while I was on hold. On the third call, I reached the business registration section. I verified my identity and explained the disputed filing. The woman on the phone checked the account. "Your certificate of registration remains active under your name and the LLC," she said. "Is there a pending change?" "Yes. It has not been processed." I gave her the city report number and asked how to submit the state fraud dispute. She directed me to a secure upload page and listed the documents they needed. They were almost identical to Thomas's list. I uploaded them from the office that afternoon. Before submitting, I checked each attachment twice. The confirmation appeared at 4:17. 3 business days later, the state account showed a fraud review hold. The responsible party request could not be processed while the dispute remained open. I printed that page too. After closing, I logged into the Point of Sale Administration panel. Our register system linked tax settings and merchant authority to the responsible party on the state registration. Employees could have individual profiles, but only verified management profiles could open a live drawer, change tax settings, or finalize the first transaction after a system reset. A new profile had been created for Valerie. The request used her personal email address and listed her role as owner. I checked the creation date. Dad had submitted it the same week he returned the forged form to Erin. The profile showed one yellow warning: responsible party verification incomplete. I called the register company the next morning. After checking the merchant account and my security questions, the support representative explained that Valerie's profile could be used in training mode. It couldn't control the live register until the registered owner approved it or the state record changed. "Can anyone approve it besides me?" I asked. "Not on the current account. If they reset the password?" "The reset goes to your verified email and phone. If they replace the terminal?" "The merchant account still requires the registered party." I thanked her and requested written confirmation. She emailed it while we were still on the call. I left Valerie's profile exactly as it was. Deleting it would have warned her. The yellow verification notice looked temporary if someone expected the state filing to clear. By late June, the renovation contracts were reaching their deadlines. Mark brought me a revised scope. He had removed the unapproved wellness product fixtures and kept the shipping area intact. The work was limited to flooring, lighting, paint, movable shelves, the checkout counter, and the exterior sign. "The materials are already paid for," he said. "By my parents?" "Yes." "Does the shop owe you anything?" "Not under my contract." "Do you expect reimbursement from the business?" "No. Kenneth is the project sponsor and payer. I read every page. The improvements were reasonable. They would close the store for 8 business days, which I could cover with online orders and scheduled pickups from the rear entrance. The exterior sign no longer included Valerie's name. The sign company had removed it after receiving my license. I signed the owner authorization for that limited scope. Mark watched me date it. "Your dad isn't going to like the changes," he said. "He agreed to pay before he had authorization." I told him that. "I know." "You want me to send him this copy?" "Yes. Send only the approved construction scope. Don't send him my license or company documents." He nodded. The work began the following week. Dad treated my signature as surrender. He came in on the first morning carrying coffee for the crew and smiled at me across the empty sales floor. "I knew you'd come around," he said. I approved the written scope. Same difference, it wasn't. I spent the closure working from the stockroom while flooring came up and lights were replaced. Joseph handled online orders from a folding table. Valerie came in each afternoon to film progress and speak to vendors whose products I had not approved. I let her film. The money was already committed. The floor needed replacing. The lighting was better. None of it gave her authority. Mom ordered the licenses reframed for the reopening. She brought in a wide black frame with 2 openings and a brass plate beneath them. The plate read, "Morris Mercantile, established 1968. The new documents will go here," she said. She expected Valerie's name to replace mine before July 14th. I took the frame from her. "City rules require the current documents to stay displayed when we reopen. Aaron's handling the changes." I looked at her. "Did Dad tell you that?" He said the delay was being resolved. Aaron hadn't spoken to him. Dad was lying to Mom now, or Mom was lying to me. I didn't need to know which. I placed the current certificate of registration and vendor's license inside the new frame. Both read Page Morris. Then I covered the front with white paper to protect the glass while the walls were painted. Mom saw the paper and smiled. "Don't remove that," she said. "We'll unveil it at the ceremony." "I won't." 2 days later, Thomas emailed me. The city had matched Aaron's submission record to Dad's email and Renee's denied notarization. The filing had been referred for formal review. My license remained unchanged. At the bottom, Thomas asked whether the shop would be open on July 14th. I called him. "We'll open at 10, I said. "I need to complete an on-site compliance visit while the disputed filing is under review. Can you come at 10? "Yes." The reopening ceremony starts at 10. He understood the silence that followed. "Do you want me to use another entrance?" he asked. "No, use the front." Thomas arrived at 9:45. He wore a gray jacket over the same pale blue shirt I'd seen at City Hall. He carried a narrow document case and a tablet. Joseph let him in through the front door. Dad was outside supervising the ribbon. He saw Thomas enter and looked toward me. "Who's that?" he asked. "Thomas Franklin." "From the city?" "Yes." Dad came inside. "Why is the licensing clerk here?" "He has a compliance visit. Today?" "That's when the shop reopened." Dad glanced at the white paper covering the framed licenses. "Is this because of the delay?" "What delay?" "The record update. You should ask Thomas." His eyes narrowed. Then Mom called him from the sidewalk because the photographer wanted a picture of my parents beneath the new sign. Dad looked at me for another second. "We'll deal with it after the ceremony." "All right." He went outside. Thomas stood near the register. "Does he know why I'm here?" he asked. "He knows you're from the city." "That isn't what I asked." "No." Thomas opened his document case. "I'll observe until there's a statement affecting the license. If nobody makes one, I can complete the inspection privately. They'll make one." "How certain are you?" "There's a brass key on a velvet cushion." He looked through the window. Mom had placed the cushion on a small table beside the ribbon. Valerie's name was engraved on both keys. Thomas nodded. "I'll stay near the front." He checked the current license against the address, inspected the tasting area, and confirmed that the new electrical work had passed. He didn't speak to my family. At 9:50, Mom came inside carrying a box of white ribbon pins. "You're not dressed," she said. I was wearing black pants, low shoes, and a blue blouse. "I am dressed." I brought the cream jacket. "I'm working. It's the grand reopening." The store opens in 10 minutes. She set the box beside the register. We need everyone outside for the photographs. Joseph has to stay with the register. He can join after the first sale. I looked at her. Whose login is processing the first sale? Valerie's. Did she test it? Your father said everything was ready. Dad had no access to the register administration panel. Then she should have no problem. Mom smiled, relieved by what she thought was agreement. I knew you wouldn't spoil this. She reached out and straightened the collar of my blouse. I stepped back. Her hand remained in the air for a moment. Please don't look angry in the photographs, she said. I don't feel angry. That was true. Anger had required uncertainty. By then, I knew what every document said. Mom picked up the ribbon pins and went outside. Joseph came over. Do you want me to log in now? No. Wait until they're ready for the first sale. What happens when Valerie tries? You'll see. He looked past me at Thomas. Does he know? Yes. Does your family? No. Joseph rubbed his palms against his trousers. I feel nervous, and I didn't forge anything. Check the receipt paper. I checked it twice. Check it again. He smiled briefly and returned to the register. Valerie entered through the propped open door. She was wearing the fitted green dress I'd seen hanging in Mom's guest room 2 days earlier. Her hair had been blown smooth, and she had a small microphone clipped near the neckline. Mom wants you in the cream jacket, she said. I know. You're not wearing it? No. She looked me over. Blue is fine. Thank you. I was trying to be nice. So was I. She moved closer to the register. Dad said the account transfer finished. Which account? The business records. Did he show you? He said Aaron had confirmation. Aaron hasn't spoken to Dad. She blinked. How would you know? I spoke to Aaron. When? Last month. Her eyes moved toward the sidewalk. What did he say? That's a question for Dad. She turned back to me. Are you doing something? I'm opening the shop. Paige. People were starting to gather near the door. The local newspaper photographer adjusted his camera beside the ribbon. 2 women from the tourism office stood near the curb. Several regular customers had arrived early, and at least 20 relatives were moving between the sidewalk and the small refreshment table Mom had arranged. Valerie lowered her voice. If there's a problem, tell me now. You've had months to ask that. Dad said it was handled. You chose to believe him. She stared at me. Then Mom waved through the window. Valerie straightened. We can talk after. That's what Dad said. She left the register and went outside. I checked the clock. 9:57. Thomas stood near a display of olive oil and made a note on his tablet. You don't have to intervene unless they claim the license changed, I said. I understand. And let them finish the announcement. He looked at me directly. Why? Because I don't want anybody saying they misspoke. He closed the tablet cover. At 10, Dad rang Grandma's old brass handbell from behind the ribbon. The sound carried across the sidewalk. Mom stood on Dad's left. Valerie stood on his right. The cushion with the keys rested on the table in front of them. I stayed just inside the shop beside Joseph. Dad began by thanking everyone for coming. He talked about Grandma opening Morris Mercantile in 1968. He described the shop as a family tradition built through hard work, loyalty, and love for Galena. He didn't mention that Grandma had transferred it to me. Then he thanked Mom for organizing the reopening. People clapped. Mom stepped forward and said the renovation had been a family labor of love. She thanked Mark, the sign company, the local producers, and Valerie for bringing fresh ideas. She thanked me last. And of course, Paige has kept things moving while we prepared for this next chapter. Kept things moving. That was how she described 10 years. I didn't react. Mom continued. Families go through changes. Sometimes one person carries things for a while, and then someone else comes home with the energy to help carry them forward. My aunt looked toward me. She wasn't smiling anymore. Most people still were. Mom touched Valerie's shoulder. For the last few months, we've been working toward a new beginning for this wonderful place. The photographer raised his camera. Dad picked up the velvet cushion. Paige, come over here, he said. This is a family moment. I stepped outside. Joseph moved to the doorway behind me. Thomas remained inside, visible through the front window. Dad lifted the engraved keys. "Your grandmother always believed this shop should belong to the next generation," he said. "Today we're proud to place it in the hands of someone who can take it into the future." He removed the keys from the cushion and handed them to Valerie. "This belongs with someone who can take it into the future." The crowd applauded. Mom began clapping before anybody else. Valerie hugged Dad, then Mom. She held the keys near her shoulder while the photographer took several pictures. I stood 2 steps away. Dad could have said Valerie was joining the shop. He could have introduced her product ideas or announced a management role. He didn't. He waited until the applause settled. "With these keys," he said, "Valerie becomes the new owner and public face of Morris Mercantile." That was the full claim. A few people looked at me. Valerie turned in my direction and held out one hand. "Come here," she said softly. I stepped close enough for the photograph. She put her arm around my shoulders. "You're still an important part of this," she whispered. The camera clicked. I said, "Then tell them whose name is on the license." Her arm tightened. "Don't do this now. I'm not doing anything." She let go of me. Dad invited Valerie to speak. She clipped the microphone transmitter to the back of her dress and moved in front of the ribbon. "I grew up in this shop," she said. That wasn't true in any useful sense. She had visited it. She had waited there for rides and complained about the bell. Nobody interrupted. When my Chicago chapter ended, I wasn't sure what came next. My parents reminded me that sometimes the best future begins where your family started. Mom pressed a folded tissue beneath one eye. Valerie continued, "I'm honored to come home and continue what our family built. Morris Mercantile is entering a completely new era." She talked about wellness products, food events, online expansion, and sharing Galena with a larger audience. Those were all things the shop already did, except for the products bearing her name. Then she made the statement Thomas was waiting for. "As the new owner and registered operator, I'm excited to welcome all of you inside." Thomas opened his document case. Dad cut the ribbon. People clapped and moved toward the door. Mom guided Valerie inside before anyone else. The photographer followed. Dad came behind them carrying the empty cushion. The white paper still covered the framed display behind the register. Mom raised both hands. "Before our first official sale," she said, "we have one more thing to unveil." Valerie moved beside the frame. Dad handed her the edge of the paper. "This makes it official," he said. Thomas stepped away from the olive oil display. Valerie smiled at the camera, tightened her fingers around the paper, and pulled. The certificate of registration was in the top opening. The city vendor's license was below it. Both read, "Paige Morris." Valerie's smile disappeared. Mom leaned toward the glass. "These are the old ones," she said. "No," I said, "they're the current ones." Dad stepped behind the counter. The update must not have printed yet. Thomas came forward. "There was no update," he said. The room went quiet. Dad looked at him. "Excuse me?" Thomas opened his document case and removed the city record. "I'm Thomas Franklin from the City of Galena Business Licensing Office. Morris Mercantile's licensed operator remains Paige Morris." Valerie was still holding the torn paper. "My father said the change was approved." "It was rejected," Thomas said. Dad's face darkened. "That's a private administrative issue. It became a compliance issue when your daughter publicly identified herself as the registered operator." The photographer lowered his camera, but the newspaper reporter was already writing. Mom stepped between Thomas and Valerie. "There's been some confusion." "No," I said. "There's been a forged filing." Nobody moved. Dad looked at me. "You don't know what you're talking about." I took the black folder from beneath the counter. I removed the city fraud report, Renee's statement, and Aaron's email chain. I placed them beside the register in that order. Thomas held up the disputed form. The filing contained a signature in Paige Morris's name. Paige denied signing it. The listed notary, Renee Hall, confirmed Paige never appeared before her and that the seal image was copied. Someone near the door whispered, Oh my God. Dad pointed at Thomas. You have no right to announce this in front of customers. You announced an unlicensed change in ownership in front of customers. It's a family business. Thomas looked at the framed documents. The city record doesn't use that category. Valerie turned to me. You knew this would happen. Yes. And you let me stand up there? You knew I hadn't agreed. Dad said he handled it. You called Aaron after the filing was submitted. You asked whether it would be finished before today. Her eyes moved toward the reporter. I didn't sign her name. I didn't say you did. I said you accepted the result without asking how it happened. Mom grabbed my arm. Stop. I looked down at her hand. She released me. Dad picked up Aaron's email chain. He reached the message where he had written that I was fully on board. His jaw tightened. Aaron misunderstood me. He printed your emails, I said. I was trying to move things forward. You returned the signed form from your account. I assumed you'd sign it, but I didn't. This could have been corrected privately. It was corrected privately. You made the false claim publicly. Dad dropped the pages onto the counter. We put $45,000 into this place. A few people near the door turned toward him. Mom closed her eyes. Dad continued. New floors, lights, counters, the sign, all of it. You accepted every improvement and then set us up. I approved a limited construction scope. Your contract names you as the payer. The shop never agreed to reimburse you. You're keeping everything. You installed it in a business you knew I owned. His mouth opened. Nothing came out. Thomas placed the disputed filing back in his case. The change request has been rejected and referred for review. The state registration also remains under Paige Morris. Keys and renovation payments don't change that. Joseph turned the register screen toward Valerie. We still need to process the first sale, he said. It sounded almost ordinary. Valerie looked at him, then at the crowd. A regular customer had placed a jar of cherry preserves on the counter before the speeches began. Joseph scanned it. The total appeared. He selected Valerie's profile and handed her the screen. She pressed Finalize Sale. A yellow message appeared. Responsible party verification incomplete. She pressed it again. The same message returned. It's frozen, she said. No, I said, your login was never authorized. Dad moved toward the terminal. Use mine, you don't have one. Mom whispered, Paige, please. I stepped behind the counter and selected my profile. The system sent a confirmation code to my phone. I entered it, opened the drawer, and processed the sale. The receipt printer started. That small mechanical sound ended the reopening more effectively than anything I could have said. The customer took her preserves and receipt. Thank you, Paige, she said. Then she stepped aside. Nobody applauded. The reporter asked Dad whether he had submitted the disputed form. He refused to answer. Mom took Valerie by the elbow and guided her toward the door. Valerie stopped beside me. You ruined me in front of everyone. I didn't hand you the keys. She looked at the engraved brass set in her hand. Then she placed it on the counter and walked out. Dad followed without speaking. The ceremony refreshments stayed outside until noon. Joseph brought them in before the sun spoiled anything. We gave the sandwiches to customers and put the drinks in the stockroom refrigerator. Thomas completed his inspection. Before leaving, he signed the compliance sheet and handed me a copy. Everything else is in order, he said. That sentence mattered more to me than the crowd. The city formally closed the transfer request as fraudulent. The state rejected the related change. Aaron provided the original emails and filing records. Renee submitted her own complaint about the copied seal. There was a review, several interviews, and a great deal of careful language. Nobody was arrested. Dad was responsible for the filing he commissioned and returned, but no ownership had transferred and no shop money was taken. Aaron's insurer became involved because he had relied on Dad instead of contacting me. He stopped doing legal work for my family. The newspaper ran the reopening story with a photograph of Valerie holding the engraved keys beneath the headline, asking who actually owned Morris Mercantile. The answer was in the first paragraph. Valerie's product line never launched. The producers hadn't received approved formulas or purchase orders. She sent me one message saying I had chosen paperwork over family. I replied, "You chose my paperwork over me." She didn't answer. She stayed with my parents for another month, then took a marketing job outside town. Her debt remained hers. I had no contact with her after that. Mom called several times. Every conversation began with what the public reveal had done to Valerie, so I stopped answering. My parents still owed the home equity loan. They couldn't recover the flooring or lights, and they had no ownership interest to sell. Their $45,000 bought improvements for my shop and a payment they had to make from retirement income. I didn't reimburse them. 3 weeks after the reopening, Dad came into the shop alone. It was raining, and he stood inside the door until the bell stopped moving. He carried the old basement key. "We changed the locks," I said. I assumed. He placed the key on the counter anyway. Joseph was in the stockroom. There were no customers. Dad looked at the framed licenses. "I knew the shop was yours," he said. "I know. I thought if Valerie was already in place, you'd let it happen. I know that, too." He rubbed the ink stain left by the key against his thumb. I sent the form back to Aaron. I told myself I was only speeding up something you'd eventually agree to. "You copied Renee's seal." "Yes." He didn't soften it. "I wanted to save Valerie," he said. "You were doing well, and she wasn't. I decided that meant taking from you would hurt less. I waited." "I was wrong," he said. "I'm sorry." It was the first apology he had given me without asking for something inside it. "I accept the apology," I said. His shoulders lowered. "That doesn't give you access to the business. I understand. And repair, if there is any, happens outside this shop." He nodded. Then he left. We started with coffee several weeks later. I didn't give him a key. I didn't let one honest afternoon erase what he had done. He showed up when he said he would, answered questions directly, and stopped asking me to speak to Valerie. That was enough to begin. It wasn't enough to forget. Morris Mercantile stayed mine. Joseph became general manager, with the title and raise he had earned. I kept the new floors, the better lights, and Grandma's old brass bell. Behind the counter, I added a small plaque beneath the licenses. Elizabeth Morris, founder, 1968. Truth doesn't need the biggest announcement. It needs a record that survives one. Subscribe if you want more family stories like mine, and tell me which city you're watching from.